It's Thursday, July 27th. This is Africa 54. Mutinous soldiers remove Nigerian President Mohamed Bazoum from power. It's the latest in a string of coups in West Africa. Immigrant rights groups sue the White House over its asylum rule at the U.S.-Mexico border. Is the guideline a violation of U.S. law? And the founders of the Somali Digital Media Academy say women's involvement in the Mogadishu film industry is surging. All this and much more coming up on today's Africa 54. African Union Chief Azali Assoumani is joining other world bodies in speaking out against the coup in Niger and said Thursday during the Russia-Africa Summit in St. Petersburg, Russia, quote, "I condemn the events in Niger, recommend the re-establishing of the constitutional order and demand the immediate release of President Bazoum and his family." President Mohamed Bazoum was removed from power Wednesday, according to a group of soldiers who appeared on national television. Ryan Chang has more.
Niger's President Mohamed Bazoum has been removed from power. That's according to a group of soldiers who appeared on national TV late Wednesday. Bazoum had been detained for hours by his own guards in the presidential palace. An army spokesman, Colonel Amadou Abderrahmane, declared the West African nation's borders were closed, a nationwide curfew was in place, and all institutions were suspended. Security forces, according to Abderrahmane, decided to rebel due to the, quote, deteriorating security situation and bad governance. Supporters of the ousted President Bazoum have been quick to condemn the army's action, gathering outside the National Assembly in the capital Niamey to call for his release. This man says he's here to defend democracy. He added Bazoum was elected for 5 years and democracy should prevail. Niger is a key Western ally in a global fight against insurgencies in the Sahel region. The coup now complicates international efforts to fight a jihadist movement that has spread from Mali over the past decade. Bazoum's election was the first democratic transition of power in a state that has witnessed 4 military coups since independence from France in 1960. The coup has sparked international condemnation, with the US calling for Bazoum's release, while the European Union, United Nations, France and others have condemned the uprising. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken.
I spoke with President Bazoum earlier this morning and made clear that the United States resolutely supports him as the democratically elected president of Niger. We call for his immediate release. We condemn any effort to seize power by force. We're actively engaged with the Niger government, but also with partners in the region and around the world. We'll continue to do so until the situation is resolved appropriately and peacefully.
This is the 7th coup in the West and Central Africa region since 2020.
Now, for more perspective on the coup in Niger, I'm joined live via Skype from here in Washington by Daniel Eisengar, a research fellow with the Africa Center for Strategic Studies at the National Defense University. He is also responsible for conducting policy-relevant research, advancing understanding of pressing security challenges facing Africa. Daniel, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Now, sadly, this is not the first coup in Niger. What seems to be driving coups in Niamey?
Yes, as your reporting noted at the top there, there have been 4 successful coups in Niger's history since its independence. But I think that one important factor to note here is that Niger had recently been on a strongly democratizing trajectory. In fact, the last coup to take place took place in 2010 and was actually intended to resolve a political deadlock that was sparked by former President Mamadou Tanja and his undemocratic efforts to hang on to power. Tanja sought to extend his time in power by reforming the Constitution and holding a referendum that the Constitutional Court ultimately ruled was illegal. And so he took action to dissolve the courts and dissolve the legislature and rule by decree at which point the military stepped in to restore democratic rule, constitutional rule, and involved the civilians in a strong transition that ultimately led to a civilian elected regime under Mahamadou Issoufou, the president prior to Mohamed Bazoum. And Issoufou acknowledged his term limits, followed institution and constitutions, and ultimately handed power over when Mohamed Bazoum was elected president just a few years ago. So I think that it's important just to note that democracy is quite strong in Niger. Nigerians have made it clear that they are supportive of democratic institutions and their constitution, and the military here seems to be a little bit out of step with those desires of Nigerian citizens today.
Daniel, very quickly, do we know the state of President Bazoum and his family?
I think at this point what we know, and obviously these things are subject to change as the military is holding him hostage and could choose to move him or release him at any moment, is that as of yesterday he was taken hostage by his presidential guard. That took place at the residence, the presidential palace. His family appears to be with him. Initially, they were able to communicate in some degree. At least his offices were able to get messages out indicating that he was safe and his family was safe. However, he has refused to resign up until now. And so, the army has gotten involved. A wider swath of military members appear to be involved in holding him, detaining him. He appears to still be at the presidential palace, and they appear to be trying to use him as some kind of bargaining chip to gain recognition from a wider set of actors.
Daniel, numerous African countries are going through political upheaval. What should ECOWAS and the African Union do, or how should they respond to this crisis, looking at the case first in Niamey and other countries on the continent?
Yeah, I think this is a really crucial moment. The first few days of any coup, particularly one like this where it seems to be somewhat fluid and uncertain at the start, are really essential for trying to undo its effects. President Bazoum has been resolute in his desire not to resign, and I think that the role of ECOWAS and the African Union are to back him up in that position. They need to continue to condemn the coup leaders, make it clear that they're not going to recognize the coup leaders, and by starving them of recognition, they remove any kind of leverage that these coup leaders have. Right, they're able to hold President Bazoum. That's true, but at the same time, if they can't receive recognition from the wider international community, whether that be regional leaders in West Africa through ECOWAS, or the African continent through AU, or beyond the African continent with partners like the United States, France, and the UN, then there's relatively little that these coup leaders can accomplish. And at that point, I think that you can make it quite clear in the actions that ECOWAS can take that Bazoum needs to be released, that constitutional order needs to be reinstated, and that process can begin to resolve what is ultimately a Nigerian affair and hopefully bring these coup leaders to justice.
Very quickly, Daniel, what seems to be triggering these coups, especially in West Africa? Look at Burkina Faso, Mali, and now we know what's going on in Sudan and Niamey.
Yes, I mean, it's very difficult to pinpoint any particular variable as the source of this instability. I think that when it comes to Niger, we can't not look at its neighbors. We have to look at Mali. We have to look at Burkina Faso. Where successful coups there have put military governments in power. Those military juntas have really failed to address the security concerns that they justified their actions of taking power with. And I think that if the Nigerian soldiers that have staged this coup attempt to justify their actions on security concerns, they're no more likely to improve the situation. And so there's certainly a lot of insecurity, but I think that President Bazoum had been making good progress on addressing it, and this is obviously a huge setback for Niger.
Daniel, many thanks. Daniel
Thank you, Esther.
Right. Daniel Eisengar is a research fellow with the Africa Center for Strategic Studies at the National Defense University. Russian President Vladimir Putin on Thursday told African leaders he would gift them tens of thousands of tons of grain within months, despite Western sanctions, which he says make it harder for Moscow to export its grain and fertilizers. Speaking at a summit in St. Petersburg, Russia, that's devoted to Russian-African ties, Putin said Russia was expecting a record grain harvest this year and was ready to replace Ukrainian grain exports to Africa on both a commercial and aid basis and honor what he says is Moscow's critical role in global food security. The event is part of a concerted push for influence and business in Africa, where mercenaries from Russia's Wagner Group remain active. In the latest fighting in Sudan, witnesses say rockets blasted Khartoum Thursday as paramilitary forces attacked a key Air Force base north of the capital. Residents reported heavy artillery shelling northwest of the city. Meanwhile, a Doctors Without Borders field hospital near Sudan's border used to have 35 to 40 beds, but in recent weeks, it housed as many as 300 patients fleeing Sudan's conflict. David Doyle has more.
At this hospital, the story of Sudan's war is written in blood. Patients here in Chad's border town Adre fled violence in Darfur. Mohammed Adam is father to a wounded child.
I
went ahead and told my family to follow me. In the middle of the road, rapid support forces found my children and they were run over by a car, killing my wife and son. My girl was also run over by the car. Thank God my girls were brought here and I joined them in Adre Hospital.
Clashes between rival military factions in Khartoum have triggered an increase in ethnically targeted violence in Darfur. Witnesses say those trying to escape to Chad on foot have been shot at. Yves Manzi Bizimana, a medical team leader for the Doctors Without Borders project in Adre, says they've been mostly dealing with gunshot wounds.
And then they present with open fractures, with infected wounds, and then with abdominal injuries that we have managed so far in the hospital.
But it's not just bullets that are threatening lives. Denis Badevant is MSF's Deputy Project Coordinator.
Today we have 200 patients. Let's say 80% of them are malnutrition.
Badevant said some of the children arriving in Adre are in the severe or late stages of malnutrition. In the past, this was a hospital with 35 to 40 beds, he adds. But in recent weeks, the number of patients had gone up to 300.
David Dove, Reuters filed that report. A recent report by the African Development Bank shows that there is an estimated $42 billion financing gap for female entrepreneurs in Africa. In Nigeria, experts point to the driving factors behind the discrepancy and call for interventions. Gibson Emeka reports from Abuja.
Kafilat Ayeni is the CEO of Bincaf Place, a one-stop shop for organic products in Nigeria capital city, Abuja. She says her spices and coconut products are sought after across Africa, Europe, and the United Arab Emirates.
And we've been able to sell so well in the US, and we'll be able to sell so well in the UK. And we're also working with other people in Gambia. We have our products in Kenya. We do very well in South Africa on our coconut flakes. And we also sell our coconut flakes very well in Dubai.
Despite her business success, she says she still have trouble getting loans from the local banks.
I want to deliver this product, I want to deliver these goods, but I can't meet up to this demand because I'm financially constrained. I have a feeling that if it's a man that is requesting for this and has all it takes and he comes to see the business that he's running, and they will be looking at risk.
Ayeni says that women are risk takers and that she worried they are seen as liability and left out of financial opportunity. But our concern isn't isolated. The African Development Bank reported an estimated $42 billion gender financing gap across the continent. That means women-led businesses isn't getting the same access to loans and financing as men. Obinaya Orokpa, a Nigerian economist, is urging the government to focus on women-friendly policies.
The government should deliberately, in her budgeting process, put in place policies that recognize the female gender.
Malisa Adeshina, the Abuja zonal head of Taj Bank, says the financing gender gap might be a cultural failing rather than the fault of the banks.
We don't have any financing for women different from men. We give the same conditions. There's no gender-specific condition for the financing we give.
According to data from the business incubator firm Faith Foundation, women make up 43% of entrepreneurs in Nigeria. Experts says while capital is vital, female entrepreneurs will also have to upscale their business structure, accounting metrics, and profitability to succeed. They recommend that the government also ramp up support for female entrepreneurs in those areas to make their businesses appeal to investors. Gibson Emeka for VOA News, Abuja, Nigeria.
Immigrant rights groups are suing the White House over its asylum rule at the U.S.-Mexico border. They say the guideline is a violation of U.S. law that protects the right of asylum regardless of how a person enters the country. A federal judge agreed with them. A U.S. District Judge, Jean Tigard, in California ruled the guideline was unlawful because it imposed conditions on asylum seekers that were not intended by Congress. The Biden administration asylum rule was released in May, and it barred some migrants from applying for asylum if they crossed the border without authorization or failed to first apply for safety in another country on the way to the U.S. The judge placed his ruling on hold for 14 days, but the delay gives the U.S. government time to file an appeal. Let us know what you think about Africa 54 and all our VOA Africa programs on our website at voaafrica.com. Still to come, women's involvement in the Mogadishu film industry is surging. We'll be right back.
In times of change, when the world seems uncertain and what we hear doesn't reflect what we see, we seek the truth. When we are told only part of the story, we lose trust. In moments of crisis, our dreams, hopes, and wishes for a better tomorrow depends on a free press. At Voice of America, we bring you the stories that people take risks to see. We connect the world and unite it with truth. At Voice of America, we show you the whole picture.
In other news, many Kenyans are voicing cautious optimism for an end to political unrest after President William Ruto said he was ready to meet opposition leader Raila Odinga, quote, anytime following months of anti-government protests. Since March, Odinga's Azimio Alliance has held 9 days of demonstrations against the government over high taxes and the high cost of living. The Nigerian Association of Resident Doctors is on strike again. The group is demanding better pay and working conditions for its members. Strikes are common in Nigerian public hospitals, which are suffering chronic underfunding. So far, the government has failed to meet the doctors' demands, which include the payment of salary in arrears. And Western nations fear an economic collapse in Tunisia could trigger even greater migrant flows to Europe. But prospects of Tunisia's sealing a near $2 billion bailout from the International Monetary Fund seems increasingly remote. The inflation-ravaged and heavily indebted country reached a tentative deal for the loan from the Washington-based IMF in October. The founders of the Somali Digital Media Academy say women's involvement in the Mogadishu film industry is surging. Abdulaziz Barrow spoke to some women who are contributing to the visual history of their country in this report from the Somali capital, narrated by Salem Solomon.
Hanan Abdulqadir Jamale is an aspiring filmmaker. She's one of many women leading the charge in the industry, and she has the support of organizations like the Somali Digital Media Academy, or SODMA. At a recent filmmaking seminar organized by SODMA, Jamale said she believed film could transform societal perceptions and create positive change.
These seminars are particularly beneficial as one learns how to film. During the process of filmmaking, the combination of audio and visual elements effectively conveys the intended message to the audience. Watching a film helps people comprehend the story in a way that they wouldn't if they had not seen the video.
One of the key ideas that drives Jamale's work is girls' education. Jamale says she hopes to inspire and empower young girls across Somalia.
I aim to raise awareness about the importance of educating girls, as there exists a part of society that believes a girl is incapable of learning and achieving great things. The community can be helped by the making of films that raise awareness and highlight the potential of girls to learn, work, and take charge of their lives.
Yusuf Abukar Ibrahim is the director of SODMA. He says that over 50 students attended this filmmaking training session and that the training makes a difference.
We are offering this training to provide an opportunity for unskilled youth living in the city to learn and gain an understanding of the skill.
He says a growing number of women like Jamale are entering the Mogadishu film industry and receiving advanced training in filmmaking.
During the training, we extensively cover topics related to cinematography, including its definition and functions and the tools used.
Ibrahim thinks that nurturing talents like Jamale and her peers can positively impact not only their lives, but also the broader community. For Abdulaziz Barrow in Mogadishu, Somalia, Salem Solomon, VOA News.
Security in the Democratic Republic of Congo is being beefed up over concerns about the safety of athletes participating in the 9th International Francophone Games. The event, which is set to begin Friday in Kinshasa, will be the first time since the COVID pandemic that athletes and artists are gathering for this global cultural exchange. VOA's Anthony Labruto has more.
On the eve of the Francophone Games, workers in Kinshasa are racing to complete preparations for the Games. The Games are a gathering of nations from the International Organization of the Francophone, or French-speaking equivalent of the Commonwealth of Nations. Some 3,000 athletes and artists from about 30 countries are arriving for the July 28th kickoff. Unlike other global athletic events like the Women's World Cup or the Olympics, the Francophone Games includes cultural and fine arts competitions that can include storytelling, poetry, or sculpture making. The Democratic Republic of Congo was originally supposed to host the Games in 2019, but the event was postponed due to the coronavirus pandemic. They were to take place in 2021, but were again pushed back until this year due to concerns about the venue being completed on time. The Congolese government believes that the extra time has given the country the opportunity to update its venues to world-class standing.
So at this point, the essential is done. We are waiting for the games, and for the rest, we will be rather happy for our various young people who can participate in sports competitions or prepare for major competitions in modern conditions. And the DRC will be happy to receive competitions for all disciplines involved in the Jeux de la Francophonie.
The beginning events are in women's cycling and freestyle wrestling. Anthony Labruto, VOA News, Washington.
Nigeria produced the first major shock of the Women's World Cup as they stunned Australia 3-2 on Thursday to leave the co-host tournament hopes on thin ice. The West African team now occupies first place in Group B with 4 points and needs to either win or draw during their July 31st match against Ireland, which is not out of contention in the tournament after losing to Australia and Canada. For more on the tournament, let's go live to Lusaka, Zambia, where sports reporter Memory Malisawa of the Zambia National Broadcasting Corporation is standing by. Hello, Memory.
Hello, hi, how are you?
I'm good. Tell us more about the African teams in the tournament and their standings so far.
Obviously, the African teams, we did see a very good start for Nigeria. They managed to draw in their first game. They forced a draw. And of course, talking of today, it's a result every African is talking about. They managed to beat the host nation, Australia, by 3-2. And so it's a good start for the Nigerians, the Super Falcons of Nigerians, who only need this time around a draw for them to go through. They're up against the Republic of Ireland, who are already voted out of the tournament. So they have all what to play for, and all they need is a draw. But talk of Zambia, obviously sad news that the soccer fans in Zambia are not very happy. The fact that Zambia is already out of the tournament. They lost 2 games. The first game against Japan, 5-0, and the second game, 5-0. 10 goals in 2 games, and they're out of the competition. A lot of talk, mixed feelings. Some feel the technical bench didn't do their job very well. But Morocco also is a team to look out for when you look at the World Cup. They didn't record a good result in their opening game. They lost by 6-0. But hey, they will be up against South Korea this time around. They're not really an easy team. We saw some good threats in that game despite conceding 6 goals. But hey, boy, hey, when you look at the big girls in the tournament, talk of German, the former world champions, and of course Japan, they won at the World Cup before. They're already through to the second round, the knockout stage. And so, it's something that you can, see even from, wherever you're watching the World Cup from, that this time around, it's a very, very competitive World Cup, a lot at stake. We've seen the women improve, if not being at par with the men in terms of, tactical, issues, in terms of endurance levels. They've done very well when you compare it to the previous World Cup. I must mention that, it's a lot of work with the technical benches around the world. They did a lot of hard work ahead of the World Cup. We can see the level of the competition. It's something, totally different at another level.
Memory, you are amazing with sports. I hope you come here and play a little bit with us in the U.S. Memory, thank you so much for your recap on that. Memory Masaliwa is a sports reporter for Zambia National Broadcasting Corporation. And that ends our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching.